Hi, let's talk about positive socio-cultural enactments. We had talked a little bit previously about views of community from the lenses of Sangha and therapeutic communities, which were very foundational influences in the program. So now I want to draw on some of the more recent scientific findings across fields, both in this positive social cultural enactments and then also in negative or destructive socio-cultural enactments. So what might be a socio-cultural enactment? I had neighbors moved in from my culture. When they moved in, we baked them cookies, went over and introduced ourselves. We had a friend of mine die. I waited a couple days. I went over to the house and spent time with the family in some way. You have someone who's sick, you cook them a meal and bring them over, right? You might say, thank you, or tell me your name, or say hi when you see people in some way, right? These little micro behaviors that kind of embed and create a community. I'm thinking of the community I live in Longmont with a lot of kind of identity diversity in how we lend each other's tools or look after each other's homes when we go on vacation in some way, and take 5 minutes to check in about things. And these are little behaviors that kind of build trust, belonging, and I think deepen transformation in the community. So in this video and the next one, I'm really going to focus on what does the counseling research, but more importantly, what might the anthropological research or the social justice research or the social psychology research say, and then I put it together in some way, and hopefully there's some interesting ideas in here. So basically, the Dalai Lama supports that Buddhists should stay up to date with their current scientific findings. So I think this is particularly important in our field as things that we believed work get found out that they no longer work. There's a whole replication of studies, chaos, where positive outcomes aren't being shown to be positive again in replicated studies, and of course with drug studies, and it's hard to know what to trust. But I think by getting a wide view, gathering a variety of opinions, you can make the best choices, say, to how to work with a client going through a separation or with grief, or in terms of sleeping disorders or shame or child rearing questions. So basically, these kind of positive enactments, when you look at it in a more general way, it's when members play out relational patterns that foster trust, support, belonging, growth, and transformation. I'm thinking of a conflict I had earlier with my neighbor where I had a friend park their car in front of my neighbor's house. And then from his cultural background, he was very upset, found that very insulting. There are some identity power dynamics where I could be on top of these dynamics. And we had to talk about it in some way. And now, if possible, I don't have people park in front of their house, but if I'm having many people over, I might inform them in some way and try to return the favor. That's a really small example, but you can think how little behaviors of smiling, saying hi, calling friends, checking in, remembering details of people's lives and asking about it in some way really promote trust, sense of belonging, a kind of mutual support. In this class, be on the lookout for places where there's positive interactions or dynamics. And I would say recognize them and even call them out when there's great attunement between two people, when two subgroups with different points of view are able to talk to one another and see each other's point of views in some way, when a group moves through dysregulation and interregulation, when a group takes risks, and then when a group is able to reflect on its process. as it's going along in some way. So I think this is a big piece of child development theory or social psychology or group theory, is that we learn from the modeling of others. So most likely there's people in your cohort who have wonderful, kind, connecting, attuning skills that you could observe and potentially even acknowledge that you've learned something from this, or you appreciated this, or you found this helpful in some way. Now, there'll be a whole nother video on destructive enactments, and you'll read eventually a chapter about destructive group events and how you might manage them as a group leader. But in terms of this class, I would say you can also recognize when things aren't going well, when someone's being alienated, when someone's being silenced. But life isn't perfect. The song isn't perfect. These are really opportunities to learn and heal and to move forward in some way, right? We learn as clinicians by making mistakes or not knowing what we're doing. That makes us bring it to supervision, makes us do more research, makes us try other approaches in some way. Our clients might give us feedback that they find this more helpful than that, and we can consider whether we're just enabling them or whether this is really true. And at the stage of treatment and their character structure, you make all these decisions in some way. But when things go wrong, hopefully it doesn't close the door. Hopefully it's a chance for repair and recovery and moving forward. So this is a very big idea, shared containment. This develops out from Melanie Klein and object relations all the way through relational theories, and Fairbairn and Winnicott, who both worked a lot with children, talk about this idea of containment, and in family therapy and in parenting and in elder care, this idea of containment. So the idea is that we as individuals and we are as a group are like a cup that can hold other people's feelings, other people's experiences. And within our ability to do that, there's safety to feel what they feel, to explore things that are difficult, to try new things in some way. Drawing from the language of educational literature, psychoeducational literature, they talk about affective practices in groups or in the classroom. So collectively holding feelings of empathy, of anxiety, of grief, tension, hope, fear. You might recognize them. You might talk about them, but you don't dismiss them. You don't say this is too much in some way. This is a skill you'll need as a clinician. You'll have to do a tremendous amount of containing as people go through very painful stories from their past and present day, current challenging situations. So cognitive practices mean bringing in critical thinking, right? Looking for what might be missing from this story. Are there other perspectives in some way? How is the culture around us embedding us to think what we're thinking about this? Holding multiple perspectives and gathering multiple perspectives. And then self-reflection, which is a big part of this class. And then another big part of this class is a kind of group reflection, a common practice in trainings and in potentially in the classroom, potentially in groups, in team meetings and organizations, is that there's a period where people are engaging in some way. It's like the out breath. And then there's a moment where we take an in breath and we reflect. What has just happened? Why did we talk about these topics? What was the emotional feeling in that conversation? Why was that the emotional feeling, right? Are we enacting something of just thinking of the polarization in politics and the punitiveness in our society in general? Are we acting that out in some way? And then cognitive practices really are putting forth effort, bringing presence, being accountable for how you show up, having some goal-directed behavior. The idea of this class is you get to learn about yourself. You get to learn about group dynamics through experiential learning. You get to learn about cultural and social dynamics through experiential learning, and you're able to eventually step into other systems and be a good team member or citizen, and also maybe eventually lead those kind of things. If you stay in the field, most likely you will inevitably get moved up and get more and more responsibility, and you'll become supervisors, you may become team leaders, you may start your own clinic of some type. So I think the goal for this class is these things. You're learning about yourself, you're learning about all the various theories of how we understand group interactions and how they're influenced by culture, and you're practicing and building your kind of core competencies as a counselor of self-reflectiveness, empathy, containment. So part of that will be in this class, there'll be times of discomfort and times of uncertainty. And this very much happens in clinical work. Noticing that, noticing your impulses that you may have when you feel discomfort, to rescue, to run out of the room, to pick sides, to be the joker, right? To elevate and join the fight and make your side wins this argument in whatever ways you've learned from your previous modeling in your life. And then also how you deal with uncertainty. This is a very core principle that, as you've learned about the Skandhas, we have some predetermined kind of scripts of how we see the world given our personal and cultural backgrounds. And the greater our ability to have more of those, which is part of counseling training, but also to have more consciousness of all those and consciousness of what we're conscious about. So in some way, as I said before, this is really a meditation practice. And you're observing yourself, you're observing others, you're observing the group as a whole. Building on this, there's some similar theories in community psychology, industrial organizational psychology, critical theories. You can think of critical race theory, or there's been a explosion of kind of class theory perspectives in the critical line of psychology. This is what's recommended for functioning, performative, task-achieving groups, is that there's moments of empathetic attuning, right? It's not just feeling it, but maybe small behaviors, looking at someone, nodding your head, sharing after they share about how you might understand that experience, or even how you may not understand that experience, and how that does sound confusing or how that does sound overwhelming. This is a core intervention in therapy, is that you need to show your clients that you're understanding what they're saying, their experience, their situation, the roles they are in their life, their dilemmas, their conflicts, their choices. And then you do this for one another. And again, you can normalize imperfections. We do this with our clients. Hopefully you do this with yourself, with self-compassion, and hopefully you do this with each other. So a piece of this is having realistic expectations. You're in this class for a very limited time. You have lots of resources, that from watching these videos to what's in the readings, and so many resources are online in them. Even though I'm on sabbatical, I'm here to support you and help you. You can shoot me a question and I will share some resources or some thoughts with you about it. But you're not going to end this class knowing everything about community and social dynamics, not knowing everything about how to be the best citizen or team member in every situation, right? Oftentimes we go into something with a very large hope, an idealized, unrealistic hope. And whether it's friendships, or whether it's academic journeys, or whether it's employment, or whether it's even the counseling process, it's very important to try to figure out what can be accomplished in this format, in this time frame. So groups work better when there's agreed upon norms, which are set up in the syllabus in this case, but generally the norms of empathy, support, curiosity, inclusiveness, and not attacking others and not being punitive to each other. You can disagree, you cannot understand, but what this, by being punitive, that's dumb, that's stupid, what a ridiculous idea, or I don't know how you would think of such a thing. Right? These can be all very kind of punitive things that really set back safety and trust in dialogue in groups. Right? I think it's important to acknowledge similarities. We're all part of one subgroup in this class, even including myself. We all have traveled or are traveling through this program in some way. We all have some interest in Buddhist psychology. We all have interest in helping others through working on our craft as a counselor. But there's also important differences that we have to acknowledge. There's all the demographic variables, which would be race, gender, sexual preference, partnership preference, style, class, abilities. But also there's lots of little subtle differences. People have had different experiences, grew up in different countries, grew up in different family structures. I have had previous life experiences. So how can we also help people be seen by acknowledging the differences? So there might be times of some form of rupture in this course, and maybe I'll send along a video I made about repairing ruptures in systems. And you can also do a ton of research about it. But oftentimes, when I cover this more fully, somehow the norms weren't clear, the norms weren't agreed upon in some way. They might need to get revisited. People may take accountability for being impulsive, not using right speech, not using right action in some way. There may be some misunderstanding of intentions or misunderstanding that happens in language. And then in this class, you'll have chances to enact forgiveness, to dialogue more about what has happened. And ideally, people can take mutual accountabilities. I think of some conflicts I am in currently with different professionals and even friends and people in my life. And is there an idea of both of us seeing what we could have done different, how that impacted one another, how we can move forward constructively? So being part of this class or being part of any team, you have to have a level of flexibility. It won't go the way you want it. It won't go the way anyone in that classroom wants it. But enlarging your ability to be flexible will help you work with clients. This is particularly shown in the diversity literature of flexibility of intervention, style, feedback, metaphors. Patience is also one of the paramitas. And then I really like this last one, which is either instilling hope or arousing hope. I think of the Buddhist idea of wind horse, right? Even in times of despair or hopelessness, can we continue to move towards that beam of light in some way that we may see? So I gave some examples. You can welcome others and you can work to understand their views. Ideally, in any team or in this class, you'll share the attention. You may share the talking time. You'll be vulnerable or part of the Buddhist paramita of generosity of sharing your experiences, making I statements, avoiding assumptions. You'll work to avoid, you might get pulled and feel impulsive. There may be a socio-cultural script going on or something so similar to your family. And is their ability to have options and not just play the rerun of what you've done in the past. Now, being part of this program, being involved in a very intensive meditation practice, really things that we haven't been aware of we become more aware of, particularly communication, relational coping styles. And there seems to be almost some permission I've seen in some Sangha communities for people to act out on these kind of regressive states of mind of throwing themselves on the floor or being very disrespectful to one another or stomping their feet or pouting in the corner or slamming doors. I understand these impulses, but the goal here is to recognize these. And once a class or community has a big disruption, it takes a lot of time to heal. So and this is same with counseling relationships, that ideally you find a way to not have that happen. Particularly as a counselor, your clients will be engaged in these kind of regressive behaviors and projections onto you and give you the strong feeling states that they have of great anxiety or hopelessness or depression, and will be pulled to act how we used to act to them, whether that's walking out of the room or whether that's giving advice. Be on the lookout for what you may want to do, but what may not fit in the context of a graduate school where people are training to be counselors in some way. So similar to the other ones, you're bringing effort, respect, openness, and ideally everyone owns their own kind of subjectivity. I think this, or I don't know, or I think this because of that. You seek to understand one's impact on others, your own impact. Potentially you can see how in the relational subgroups of dyads, people impact each other and impact the unfolding nature of this group. There's an idea across theories about one of life's tasks is to be the best citizen you can be. How can you be a team member? How can you be a citizen of this community to make this community as productive, healthy, beneficial, developmental, and this idea of learning, helping people build counseling competencies that you can be. You can always think of what are the options for me to behave in a way that would help this move forward. And being a citizen doesn't mean agreeing, but it does mean engaging, and it does mean sharing one's views. So even within this literature about positive social interactions or pro-social behavior, they also have sections where they talk about interrupting, addressing behaviors that are destructive to a community or a team's functioning. Generally, when someone either attacks someone else or makes an overgeneralization about some negative qualities of others in the group or the group itself in some way, that can really reduce safety and trust and empathy, although you shouldn't sit on this. The skill of a counselor, I think the skill of a citizen, the skill of a partner, is really learning how to be honest with yourself and use right speech and communicate in a way that is understood and builds collaboration. Now, there's little subtle ways that people will attack others. They'll roll their eyes, they might fold their hands, they might blow their lips out. Right? They might be subtly dismissive. They might have an air of superiority. They could use sarcasm. So just expand your awareness in this class. Notice those little things. Right? It's important that when people are projecting, saying this is what this is, that gets interrupted, particularly if it's destructive or unrealistic. And you find a way to say, that doesn't feel true for me, or I see it differently, or could you talk about your own subjectivity? You will each have your own unique subject experience in this class, as you all are having probably throughout the program, and you each are having in your meditation practice. So noticing that and not overgeneralizing, right? There's a common rule in social psychology of assumed similarities, that this happens in Western cultures and actually happens in other cultures where people just assume what they're feeling and what they're thinking is what others around them are thinking. Sometimes this is true if you're really subtle with exchange and you can subtly sort out how this thought might have a different texture or flavor than a thought, the similar thought that you may be having in some way. Right? You work with all these subtle energies as you move along in the field. So if there's a diversity in sensitivity, I think that has to be acknowledged and brought to light. Otherwise, this will continue, right? When things that hurt functioning happen to a group or in a partnership or in a team, it has to be addressed. Otherwise, people will withdraw and there'll be miscommunications, there'll be weird vibes, right? So something that doesn't work is usually giving ultimatums, having unrealistic demands. I want everyone to talk first before I have to talk. Or I want us to just look at this through this lens that's most dear to my heart and my spirituality practice in some way. So there can be a lack of collaboration. And when that's happening, I think it's important to note that in some way. And so much of the counseling literature about what is successful in counseling is the counselor's ability to be collaborative, to work in a way that feels authentic to you, to your training, to your knowledge of what's effective in psychotherapy, and also collaborative with how the client believes the process should go in some way. The process in here will be moments of connection, moments of disconnection, moments of boredom, moments of confusion, moments, I hope, of laughter and joy. And you'll expand your range, hopefully, to be with those, contain those, and collaborate with those energies in some way. So you don't want anyone kind of dominating all the attention of the group. And I don't think you want any one topic dominating the attention of the group. This isn't a class about resolving interpersonal conflict in cohort members. It's a class about you practicing being a citizen. It's a class about you learning about systemic dynamics, right? It's a class for you to take what you learn here and build this potentially into other teams and other groups and other organizations, to have them be as healthy and functional and impactful as they can be within realism, of course. So you can be on the lookout for group cognitive distortions, or we can think about this as groupthink or subgroup think, this overgeneralizing, mind reading, you know what other people think, you're fortune telling, you know what's going to happen in the future in some way. You're taking some small incident and you're exaggerating it into the biggest wound ever, or you're denying and avoiding or minimizing something that may need to be discussed in some way. And we each have patterns around these kind of cognitive fallback options we have to understand the world and feel protected in ourselves in some way. But you can explore the reasoning of what the group thinks at any one time. It can happen. There can be polarized, entrenched subgroups that people break into their tribes. They want this, you want that. I'm good, you're bad. I won't collaborate with you anymore. I don't care about you. So very toxic, basically unfunctional, maybe the state of our current nationwide politics to some degree. While you can be a part of certain subgroups, I think if you're being authentic to yourself, you're probably a part of many subgroups, right? And there's extreme pressure to conform with all the ideas of whatever subgroup you identify with, but that doesn't promote organizational or team or cohort growth. And then if there's repetitive, destructive dynamics, such as one person dominating, or too much coffee talk, or only certain topics can be approached, a lot of potentially avoidance. You can again note that in some way. Um, I wanted to end with this comes from a talk I heard by Lamarad Owens about community. And in the group, people were really criticizing each other, judging each other, critiquing one another, arguing their viewpoints in some way. And Rod said something like this: that's community, but also look around and actually engage in mutual aid with one another. That is real community. I'm probably paraphrasing that, but I think you get the idea of both the madness and imperfections of community life. But I think Lama Rod was often talking about the possibilities for growth and compassion and understanding and effective collaborative action. Okay, hope you found this helpful.